I would love to start with a brief introduction about the concept of clampless proximal anastomosis. So is the concept of how do we perform our proximal anastomosis? What is out there in literature? What do we know about how we manage the proximal, the ascending aorta during our coronary artery bypass grafting? What is your daily practice? How do you mitigate your risk of stroke in your surgery?
I think that's an absolutely great question. I mean, I think it just makes sense to all of us, excuse me, that the more we manipulate the aorta, particularly if it's at all atherosclerotic, the greater the risk that we're going to have, our patient's going to have an embolic event such as a stroke or renal failure or other event. So it really behooves us to be extremely careful. First of all, and I think the most important thing is that we really have to do a very good assessment. You cross clamp the aorta. If you do it with a single cross clamp versus a cross clamp with multiple side biter applications, that you increase the risk of stroke. And I think that just makes sense because, again, we're manipulating the aorta more, we're clamping the aorta more, we're increasing the possibility of damaging the aorta and ending up with embolization. I think the other thing that's important when we think about proximal anastomoses, when we go to an off-pump procedure, how comfortable are you with putting that side biter on the ascending aorta? I have to admit, when I began doing off-pump surgery back in the 90s, it's the one thing that really frightened me about off-pump surgery. I always had confidence in my ability to do a very good distal anastomosis, to take time and work with my anesthesiologist so that I had hemodynamic stability, so I felt very comfortable when I was doing my distal. But when it came time to doing those proximal anastomoses, there was always a level of discomfort. First of all, you got to get the blood pressure down before you put the side biter on in a patient who you might have done the distals but isn't completely revascularized yet, and the risk of ischemia. And I've seen that where we've kind of overshot. The second time is while you're doing it, it's very possible that blood pressure starts creeping up and the side biter starts moving off the ascending aorta, and now you're not really having a good time. And what kind of injury or damage is that doing? So I think when we look at these devices such as the Enclose II, where we can do our proximal anastomoses off pump, there's a level of relaxation that I have just like when I'm doing my distal. I'm no longer worried that the clamp is going to come off, or the blood pressure is going to get too high, or we're going to have aortic damage. And so I like to feel comfortable when I operate. And I think that for me, just as a surgeon, that's so important because it allows me to do the best job that I can do.